JFK didn't really have a legacy other than basically recording sports games as well as horse races in other countries that were a few hours ahead of where you were. And basically, they would make sure that the time of the day that they recorded in was basically the time of the day that they were playing it in. So pretty much they would have already played a whole day's worth of sports games and a whole day's worth of horse races before you basically were before you actually saw them. So basically, they knew every horse race, every sports game, everything that was going to happen before you did. So basically, when you went and placed your bets on the horse race or whatever, you would be looking at a TV screen thinking that that was maybe 30 minutes ahead of you, pretty much, or maybe 20 minutes ahead of you someplace, because the time of day, the viewpoint of the time of day matched the viewpoint outside your place or something like that. They basically capitalized on daylight savings time, pretty much. And they even did some things basically to hedge it. So basically, they knew where what the outcome of the horse races as well as the sports games was going to be. So basically, JFK didn't have a legacy, unless you also count what NASA was, which is basically NASA the boxer. I mean, which is basically pretty much leaning on people, getting money, and basically beating the crap out of people that weren't on steroids. That was the only legacy and the only involvement that Nixon ever had, other than maybe some like 8 or 9 or 10 failed TV shows, which was basically like the Space Cadets or the Apollo radio show, which was basically Apollo his dog and Fido his other dog. Anyway, so like I said, nothing to do with the space program whatsoever, other than they built some cardboard models of stuff, which they later on built out of some much better looking metal and painted them to look like they were spaceships or space something. So that's all JFK's and Nixon's real involvement with the space program, for the most part. Other than maybe bribing a lot of people and basically also trying to get into the White House. And pretty much all they really did was basically bribe everyone to get to where the police officers were only using lead bullets. And then, of course, use their depleted uranium armor to basically run amok and get their way into the White House, which took a lot of effort. And other places. So anyway, basically their only legacy basically is death and destruction. So they really didn't have anything to basically try and get elected on, other than pretty much pissing off a whole bunch of people that were in Ireland and all over the world. And basically running this huge betting scam. Basically, everything JFK is pretty much just a scam. Breaking into museums, stealing old classic cars, or bribing and then killing the museum owners, and then basically taking the cars out of the museums, and stuff like that. Like his car that they stole was actually a black car that was later on painted blue or something like that. Anyway, basically just a bunch of lies, and pretty much he got shot for it. And but there was also several different clones, like 3 or 6 or 8, actually 30 clones in all, basically. So they really didn't have a legacy. They really didn't have anything. Other than when I was going to take some astronauts to basically another planet, in which case they basically tried to muscle their way in on that. But, anyway. So basically, they were just trying to get to me to basically kill me, pretty much. Because I owned America and Germany, and the easiest way to take over a country is to kill the leader. Or make people think he's not the leader. Anyway, so they didn't really have a legacy, so they tried to create legacy. And another thing is, if people knew who he really was or where he really came from, basically he would be shot on the spot, along with Nixon and basically anybody else that called themselves USAF, pretty much. And like I said, all this work only really got them stranded on Mars or some planet, or basically locked on inside of a colony ship that was bound for another star system that was not going to turn around for them. And did not really care, because they were just 1 or 2 people, and pretty much they tried to start a mutiny, and it didn't really work out for them that way. So anyway, lots of attempts at basically taking over the world and basically trying to get hackers or computer programmers or someone to help them out to try and basically get to me, pretty much. And cocaine and Rodney Briley was probably that way that they were managed to get to me. And pretty much it was basically just a bunch of money that they squirreled away from horse betting games and horse betting things and casino money, and basically just the money that they were managed to squeeze out of people and kill for or whatever. And basically, like I said, in a time when everybody was just only shooting lead rounds, these people shot real bullets. Anyway, that's all the JFK legacy that there ever really was, or Nixon legacy. Anyway, so realistically, they had nothing to do with the USAF. It was just a bunch of cameramen that did all this stuff, and pretty much the black people, Harlem Wolf, actually had a lot more effect on everything. And basically renting my for rent old classic submarines, which I don't think they had torpedo tubes. I don't know how they launched the torpedoes actually. Um, anyway, they basically were stealing and grabbing and forcing people to build them things, and pretty much, they spent their whole lives on this. They, like 30 clones, worked very hard to basically take me down, and really, like I say, they didn't really get all that close. Not really. I mean, I'm a living legend. Like I said, there's many photographs of my LS spaceship going around Mars. I love to do the Mars run, or Mars or Saturn, basically, where you'll see the planet, and then you'll see my great big ship and my wings on my ship, my great big wings in space. I know I look dorky, but we use them for a very valid reason of skimming the atmosphere of planets to see if the atmosphere is safe or not. Anyway, like I said, I'm a living legend, and like I say, a lot of people would be on Earth, and a lot of Irishmen would even say, "I'm a living legend," and it's like, well, what kind of legend are you really? I am the living legend, the most living of legends, the creator of the LSF-71 spaceships, as well as the LSF colony ship, and also its mainframe, so in a human form. So anyway. And also the person who bought America and created laws and also created endoskeletons, exoskeletons, and did a lot of genetic work myself. So anyway, so they spent their whole lifetimes pretty much trying to get to Rodney, get to me, get to someone. Anyway, and trying to kill me, basically. Or trying to be somewhat legend next to me. Which, realistically, like I said, I'm not sure they even ever had. I don't think USAF ever really had a rocket ship more than they forced a lot of people to basically build them a rocket ship. And they really didn't have a rocket ship. They didn't even have motors. They stole them from Russia. They went to Russia. They shot about a bunch of people. They found the warehouse with my engines inside of the warehouse. And then they killed everyone at the site. And then they stole a bunch of engines and tried to mount it onto a rocket frame, basically. Basically, I had about 80 rocket engines sitting inside of a warehouse inside of Russia, which were titanium or depleted uranium, or it's very expensive, basically. And they're sitting in there like a Christmas tree forest. And basically, they went up there and they killed everybody at the warehouse and killed everyone that had ever any knowledge of the warehouse. And then they stole like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or the whole room of them. Like I said, those are actually my engines, and they're actually built in not Russia but Germany, and they're just being stored in Russia. And they're actually very old as well. Back from like 1920 or 1800 or something like that. I was going to use them for something, but then I didn't need them. So I just put them in storage, and later on I was going to sell them for money. But basically the rocket engines, very, very, very big, very nice rocket engines. A couple different sizes, I think, but just test stuff. I didn't really need them for anything. So anyway, they basically just stole the 80 that were there pretty much, and then tried to get a bunch of people to build them, deconstruct them and rebuild them, or build ones like them, basically. Like I said, JFK, Nixon, they didn't have any expertise at all, and anyone who worked on their stuff would eventually find themselves with a bullet in the head. USF AF people basically practiced leave no survivors, leave no witnesses, basically. So any group that is dealing with USF, like I say, even the cadets that worked on anything top secret or national security would find themselves being shot in some sort of random school shooting or something like that. Like, I'm not sure if it actually happened, but I remember there was a couple of attacks. NASA and his group, or basically the NASA group, which was the NASA boxing ring group, and some black people would hit basically the USAF USAF group school, pretty much, at some point in time. I forget exactly when that happened, but they killed a bunch of students there. Anyway, that were working on some project. Like I said, a lot of people saw the United States Air Force, but it actually was United States Armed Force. That's what the symbol on the back.